Well, first of all, I am super jealous that you get to have Kent. He is fabulous in every way possible. So I might have to crash your party.
Oh, please do.
Oh my goodness. So, okay, can you see my screen?
No.
Oh, am I not?
No, you haven't shared yet.
Oh, I haven't? Okay, hang on. How about now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, good. Excellent. Well, I am really excited to talk about succulents today because they are one of my favorite low maintenance, easy to grow plants. I'm literally surrounded by them, which is why I'm sitting outside because I thought it would be fun to be
Bree,
able
your
to give
screen
you.
went away.
Oh, my screen went away?
Your
Yeah.
screen went away.
Oh, how weird. Okay.
There you are.
How about now?
Now
No.
it's good.
No.
You're not seeing the screen?
I see her screen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, gosh. Well, let me know if that happens again. I don't understand how that's happening. Um, so we're gonna hop right in because I have a gigantic program. Whoops. Let's see if I can. There we go. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Brie. I live up in Fuquay, so not terribly far. And succulents have just long been a kind of a hobby and passion for me. Um, I have written a couple of books, not about succulents, but perhaps I should, considering how many I have. And I just kind of generally am a plant nerd. So, if there's a plant you have a question about, you can feel free to ask me because I'm not very well adjusted. My whole life revolves around plants. And the main thing about succulents, they are low maintenance, they are high impact, and a lot of them, if you don't bring them in for the winter, are annuals. And I just want you to feel okay about that because honestly, for what they provide, it doesn't really matter that you might buy them once a year. Now, they are very easy to overwinter, and I'm going to share with you how I go about overwintering mine. But, a lot of times people won't, want to grow something like what I have here in this pot. And none of these are winter hardy for this region. And sometimes it's not temperature as much as it is rainfall. Like we get so much rain in January and February, and that's not really when succulents want to get a ton of water. So, bringing them into a dry, above freezing environment is really critical for being able to overwinter these things here in the East Coast. So, I generally think of my succulents as annuals, and then if I take the time and effort to overwinter them, then it's a bonus, and I don't have to rebuy them all. The thing with succulents is they store water in their leaves, so they don't really need to be in fully saturated soil. However, the succulents that I'm going to be talking to you today about are actually quite forgiving, particularly through the growing season, to have excessive water. Like you can grow them in normal potting soil and water them regularly. They'll actually just grow a lot faster, but they will tolerate, you know, I'm not going to say extreme drought, but they will tolerate being abused to a pretty significant degree because they store water in their foliage. Now, I'm not going to talk to you about anything that's prickly. I don't like prickly plants. I am not coordinated, so I hurt myself when I have thorny things around. And my first job in North Carolina, I worked as an estate gardener, and she had this huge succulent collection, many of which fall more into that cactus category. And, I was getting like $8 an hour. And one of my jobs was to weed crap like that. Right. And as a home gardener who does this because I enjoy it, I'm not going to do that to myself. So I had to use tweezers and literally pluck, and it's almost always oxalis that gets into your succulent containers. I had to actually physically hand remove that. And I remember saying, I will never do this to myself when I have the option. So I don't. First of all, I don't grow thorny things that cause pain. And I also, if I have a terrible weed infestation and something that you know, is difficult to weed, I just throw it in the compost and I start fresh. So that's my advice to you. Like a lot of the challenges gardeners have is just not setting the right standards, or, you know, kind of cut your losses and start fresh instead of doing a task that totally is terrible. Let's see. There we go. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to talk to you about anything that's in this photograph. I had a really bad experience when I was the production manager at Plant Delights, and we grew a handful of succulents that were very pokey. And I had an excited intern that like tripped and fell, and I was carrying a tray of freshly propagated pokey varieties, and the tray fell into my chest, and I had thorns, you know, that went like straight through my bra into all this tender area. And it took almost 3 months for it to all heal. And that was the moment where I said, I'm not doing that to myself. So I'm going to talk to you about plants, succulents that don't hurt. Really critical component. So they are best grown in full to part sun. And there's actually a number of hardy varieties that you can grow in pretty dense shade. And we're going to talk about those in a little bit. But for the most part, succulents do better with brighter exposure. I grow succulents in every part of my property. East facing, south, west, north. So really there isn't like a place where you can or can't grow them, but certain varieties are going to do better with more sun, like maybe south or west facing. And others will actually do really well, you know, in eastern or northern exposure. And so I'm going to give you the names and varieties of things in which do better in more sun or more shade. The critical thing is well draining soil. And believe it or not, these are actually some pictures that I took in San Diego. And granted, you know, it doesn't rain very often in San Diego. In fact, it maybe only rains when I fly there and visit. I'm the person that brings inclement weather basically wherever I go. And I was just horrified when I saw these planters. This was in Balboa Park, and they didn't have drainage holes. Like, you absolutely cannot grow succulents in standing water. That is the exact opposite condition of what they want. And to think that they were doing this in a municipality where they absolutely have trained horticulture staff, I was so offended and flabbergasted. And I actually wrote to them when I got back, and I'm like, really, you can't drill some holes in your containers? Like, this is a terrible example to be setting for passersby who don't know any better. Hopefully they've remedied this problem. Now, they actively grow during the heat of the summer. And so this is a really critical thing because, you know, we're hot and we're humid, and, you know, we get rain, but sometimes like this week, it's not very meaningful. So I am actually in the habit of watering my succulents basically because I have them mixed in with other plants that need water, and my succulents end up growing really, really fast. And, you know, like my containers just are like bursting with vegetation because I have them in well drained, but not super, super dry soil. So they will grow more if you give them more water. And like you can see here in this photograph, that's a mixed container with some succulents, and then, you know, some other non-succulent plants, things like euphorbia, diamond frost, and Cuban oregano, and I don't know what else I had in there. I think I had millet planted in this container. So succulents are really well suited to grow with a wide array of other plant materials. So you don't have to only grow succulents together. They can be mixed with other things. So the soil is really the most critical part of successful succulent growing. And really any of these types of potting soils work really well. And these are basically kind of your standard potting soils that you would buy, at any garden center or even Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart. So, they do well in a peat moss based potting soil. And that's kind of the industry standard for when you buy a bag of potting soil. It usually is peat moss based. And the thing with peat moss is it holds water, but it dries out really fast, but it re-wets very easily. So it's a very adaptable soil to use. Mixed with that, you often have the white stuff, which is perlite. And perlite is there just to add aeration and drainage to the peat moss. So usually when you're buying potting soil, these are already mixed together. You're not having to buy either of these separate. You certainly can. You can make your own potting soil. I actually have a recipe on YouTube showing how to mix your own, but really, it's not really necessary. Like you can just use normal potting soil. Now, the thing that you absolutely do not want to use is vermiculite. And really, as a home gardener, there's almost no reason for you to ever use vermiculite, especially living in the Southeast. We do get too much rain annually for using vermiculite outside in containers or in the ground. This is what causes a lot of root issues, a lot of root rot like rhizoctonia and pythium, terrible diseases that will wipe out all of your plants. It often starts from the incorporation of vermiculite. So my recommendation is just don't buy this ever. You don't need potting soil that has vermiculite in it. And you absolutely do not want to use vermiculite for growing succulents. It's just altogether a product that really shouldn't even be sold south of the Mason-Dixon line because our climate doesn't really accommodate the use of this product. We just have too much disease pressure because of the climate that we live in. Now, a product that works really, really well, especially for increasing drainage, and this is especially true for growing in containers where you might be using, a peat moss potting soil. And permatil, if you're not familiar, permatil is one of the all-time greatest products ever, and it's actually manufactured out of North Carolina. So it's not available everywhere, but it is available in North Carolina, usually at independent garden centers. So they don't sell through Lowe's and Home Depot, but you can usually go to, a local garden center and they usually stock it, or you can ask them to carry it and they will bring it in for you. This is just a really amazing product that not only does it increase drainage, it helps deter voles because it's a kind of a sharp, very light gravel. So you can add it to any hole that you dig and it will help prevent voles from eating the root systems. It also it holds heat. So in the winter, this might actually make you go from like zone 8 to zone 9. If you've ever visited Plant Delight's nursery or the J.C. Ralston Arboretum, they have huge berms filled with permatil, and they're basically zone 9 berms. They're like ways to sort of create a microclimate by the use of this particular product. Now, the growing tips, usually overwatering plus high humidity can lead to death. That's not always true. I actually have found that like in the summertime when we're really humid, like, usually starting June, then certainly July, August, September, I generally water my succulents like once a week, maybe every 10 days. If it rains, then I can totally check out. If I'm growing succulents mixed with other plants, then it gets watered more often. I actually haven't had in the last 10 years of being in this garden, I've had almost no plant death in succulents, which is why my collection keeps getting larger. A few plants might die over the winter season when I get tempted to water them. but we'll talk about that. You do not water your succulents during the non-growing season at all, and they will overwinter for you. And I recommend growing both hardy and tender varieties. My recommendation is just kind of consistent watering. And like I said, that's about once a week, kind of on average. They don't really need to be fertilized. They have very low fertility needs. And there's very few pests and diseases that will impact your succulents. Some of the insects that you might want to look out for, and this is actually more prevalent when you bring them inside versus being outside. Usually outside, you have enough beneficial bugs to kind of combat these problems. But aphids, you can deal with just spraying insecticidal soap. Fungus gnats, and this is for all things, not just succulents, but if you have fungus gnats, which are kind of these little, like, they almost look like fleas that are jumping around on your soil, you just need to stop watering. The fungus gnats exist because your soil is too wet. So the absolute easiest way to deal with fungus gnats, and this is especially for houseplants, just stop watering. It's it's amazing how quickly that can fix this problem. And then mealybugs, in the summertime, you can spray mealybugs with insecticidal soap. In the cool season, basically like October to April, you can spray those with dormant oil or horticultural oil. Insecticidal soap is usually the broad spectrum easiest thing to use. And again, this goes way beyond succulents. This is really for any plant, including food crops that you might be growing. It's, rated organic. It's just a very safe kind of broad spectrum thing that it's not a precaution, it's a reaction. So when you have bugs, you spray this. And you can make your own. Using pure Castile soap is better than like using like Dawn dish detergent. Dawn's just a little too foamy. What you want are the fatty acids that will actually like totally dissolve in the water. And then, if you have city water, you just use tap water. And then the ratio is just 1 quart of water per 1 tablespoon of soap. So it's super easy to make yourself. And you can actually add other elements to it to deal with things like in the summer you might have grasshoppers. Grasshoppers can eat a lot of plants, like they eat the foliage. Well, you can add either a teaspoon of like garlic oil or crushed red pepper oil, and that will help repel chewing insects. It actually also helps with things like rabbits and groundhogs and deer. A teaspoon of apple cider vinegar will help with powdery mildew, which isn't a problem on succulents, but is a problem for a lot of other plants. And then adding 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil will act as a surfactant. So that will help make it stick longer, so it'll work for a longer period of time. But generally, say you have aphids, you spray insecticidal soap, it works within the first 10 minutes. And then you can just, with a hose, wash off the dead aphids and the problem has been resolved. So propagating succulents is something that people are always really interested in. And it's quite easy, though it might be a little bit counterintuitive because it's not like propagating other plants. For the most part, what you do is you actually like remove a leaf or remove a growing tip and you just sit it out for like 2 or 3 weeks. So you don't want to put a freshly cut succulent into soil because it will rot. So you actually need to allow it to dry in open air and actually callus before you stick it in soil. And so often what will happen is, you take a leaf of an echeveria or some other plant, and in that few weeks while you're allowing that callus to form, it'll actually create a rosette and it'll create little air roots. And then you can literally just set that on soil in a pot and it'll root in, and then you get another plant from absolutely nothing. The key with when you're just starting to do this is not to water from above. So you want to put like a tray underneath and let the what the potting soil actually absorb the water from below, and that'll help prevent any potential water pooling on the leaves, which can lead to sun scald or rotting. I fertilize my succulent containers only once a month from April to October with just a mix of fish emulsion or kelp meal. I've just found that these ocean-based liquid fertilizers are just very effective. Frankly, I use fish emulsion on anything that's in a pot, and I include succulents in that. And that's partly how I get my planters to just be like overwhelmingly brimming. I have found that traditional fertilizer like Miracle Grow actually doesn't benefit succulents. It's actually better not to use any fertilizer than to use the blue stuff. So this is from experience. The liquid fertilizer like Miracle Grow will often like push it too much, and then a lot of the leaves will fall off. And I just think that fish emulsion's the easier solution. Now, I think succulents are really just sort of overall like a great gift and a great decoration. I actually grew succulents for my wedding, and these decorated the tables, but they were also our gift to everybody who came to the wedding. And here we are 9 years later, I still have the succulents from our wedding. So it's kind of nice because, you know, there's not a lot of plants that would be that adaptable. They were, you know, they were also a plant that, because I'm always trying to get more people to garden, they were a plant that didn't intimidate all of my guests who weren't into horticulture. Plus, I had pretty pottery made for them. Here, that was a picture I took last year of some of the wedding succulents. They've graduated to a bigger pot. And the cool thing is this is actually a hardy variety of Echeveria called topsy-turvy, which I'll give you the information on. But this can be grown outside year round, and it always flowers for my wedding anniversary, September 20th. So now some varieties are hardy, like they live here through the winter season, and others should be hardy, but they aren't. And that's because of our climate. And so I wanted to go over a couple just so that you don't feel bad if you've grown these and killed them. So Aeonium, which if you go to California, you'll see these everywhere. Aeonium hate the East Coast. Like they hate it. Okay, for one thing, they are actually a southern hemisphere plant. So they are actively growing through the winter, not the summer. They're actually summer dormant. So first off, that's a huge problem. They hate humidity. It's like we live in the world's most humid area, right? Like these plants don't live. So this is usually what happens to Aeonium when you grow them in North Carolina. They just slowly die. They also like alkaline soil. We are naturally acidic. Most of our potting soils are on the acid side of neutral, and our water is on the acid side of neutral. So growing these is basically impossible. Another plant that's Southern Hemisphere native to South Africa, Aloe polyphylla. It's truly one of the most beautiful plants you'll ever set your eyes on. But this is literally what it does the first night that we are over 70 degrees, which we've already had, right? So, you know, don't feel bad if this happens to you, because it happens to literally everyone. It's just our environment. But there are a lot of plants that should do well here, but don't. And that includes hens and chicks. And, you know, I grew up in Michigan, and Sempervivum are hardy to zone 3, but they suffer in zone 7 and 8. And that's because our summer night temperatures are much higher than they're accustomed to. So Sempervivum, or hens and chicks, are actually an alpine plant. They are native to like high elevation in Austria. So again, we don't have a lot in common with that environment. There are a handful of varieties that I'm going to talk about that have actually done well enough for me. But like compared to people in colder climates, sempervivum tend to look like this in our climate because again, any temperature over 72 degrees at night, the plants can't shut down. They exhaust themselves. That would be the equivalent of you sweating 24 hours a day. You would eventually become so dehydrated that, you know, your body would go into shock. And that's precisely what happens to these things. So I recommend finding a nursery that you love and not always depending on these being, you know, 20-year-old perennials. Like there's nothing wrong with going and buying some new succulents every year. And the nursery that I have found, which I know is a little far for y'all, it's like 2.5 hours for me. I go down to Malone's to buy succulents, and then I also go to IKEA because I love IKEA, irrationally love IKEA. And Malone's is just, I think, the most extraordinary nursery. They really only do succulents. So it's, and their prices are crazy cheap. I think they're like $2.50 a pot. Whereas like Lowe's and Home Depot succulents have gotten really expensive. So it's totally worth a trip over to Charlotte, maybe visit some other gardens while you're in the area and hit up Malone's. If you're ever in like the DC, Maryland area, Thanksgiving Farms is another like absolutely amazing garden center, and they do an exquisite job with succulents. I have some friends that live in Bethesda, so whenever I visit them, we make a pilgrimage over to Thanksgiving Farms, which again, that's like 6.5 hours away from me. So it's not necessarily that you would, you know, go out of your way to do it, but if you're passing by. Now, there are some really creative ways to grow succulents, and that's what I want to show you now. As a garden club, I would highly recommend doing like a workshop, making these kinds of displays. These are actually a really good way to do a fundraiser because, you know, these are just so amazing. And these are so easy to create. So you're just basically using a normal pot filled with potting soil. And then you're just taking pieces of succulent that aren't even rooted. They're just calloused. And you're creating these designs. So, I mean, it takes about 15 minutes, you know, it's ridiculous, but the impact of this is amazing. I do this. I've actually started planting bricks that have holes in them, and then I line my garden edges with these. It's just a really kind of interesting, unique way to create an edge. I have some faux logs that are just filled with little pieces of succulent that I use as like centerpieces for outdoor tables. This is one that somebody bought me from Malone's in the autumn. They are literally just gluing pieces of succulent onto a pumpkin for a fall display. And then you can actually take those succulents and pot them up. I have all of those things, you know, the pumpkin eventually rotted, but all of those succulents are now growing in pots. And in fact, some of them are right here, like this piece right here is from that pumpkin. I often see these glass orbs, and I think they look really great. The problem with these is that a lot of times they don't have drainage holes, so it's harder to grow things long term when they're not draining. So this is, to me, this is like a very temporary installation. Obviously containers are a really, you know, logical place to start because you have control over the drainage, and you know, you don't have to worry if we're getting a hurricane, you're going to get 12 inches of rain, you know, you can bring it into a garage or under a covered porch and prevent the plants from getting too waterlogged if they're in a pot. So the traditional way for growing succulents is in terracotta because succulents really benefit from, you know, the fact that terracotta is very sharply drained and the soil stays very warm. This is a photograph from Portugal where succulents do extremely well year round outside in the Mediterranean climate. Here's a picture of some tiny succulents that I overwinter in my office. This is just on my on my shelf above my computer. And I don't water them at all in the winter season, and they do perfectly fine. And then I bring them outside once we're frost free, and they grow outside in these pots all summer. I think the main thing with succulents is how dramatic they can be, and I think they look very sophisticated. You know, they're not a petunia, you know, there's something totally different. You know, I think I actually took this picture at Blockade Runner a few years ago. I was just loved this juxtaposition with this, you know, beautiful wall hanging and these tender succulents, which do really well again in the winter inside, but then that planter can be moved outside for the summer. Here, you know, just a small planter, uh, in a little seating area in a garden, this is just like the lowest maintenance, but I think highest impact that you can get for having a planter. Hypertufas are a really good way to grow succulents, and they're actually pretty fun to make. This is actually just a styrofoam, what is it? A styrofoam cooler with the hypertufa like cement stuff put on it, and then filled with normal potting soil and a mix of succulents. Here's one of these little tiny ones that a friend gave me for, I think, like my 38th birthday, and I still have it. I haven't potted it. It still looks awesome. I just bring it in the winter and put it out in the summer. They're a really good candidate for hanging baskets, especially, hanging baskets where you have them in an area that they're difficult to water, because they're going to be more forgiving than Boston ferns. I think there's a lot of different options actually for using succulents as hanging baskets. I have a succulent table, which was inspired by this one at Flora Grub out in San Francisco, and I'm going to walk you to it because it's right behind me. I haven't planted it for the season yet because I have swallowtail caterpillars eating the parsley that was planted all winter, and hopefully you can see those little swallowtails right there. So I'm waiting for those to become butterflies before I take the parsley out and replant it. But my husband built this. We were home like, I don't know, 10 hours from this trip to San Francisco. And David was like, I'm building a succulent table. And he built ours like bar height. So we just use like bar stools to sit at it. It's like our permanent outdoor dining. And each summer it gets planted with a different mix of tender succulents, and they grow all summer. It's about 6 inches deep, and it has about 300 holes drilled into the bottom. So it's really well draining. And it's something that everybody always comments on. And, it's just something that's kind of unique and different. And it's a really great low maintenance way of being able to cultivate these plants. This is what I had it planted as last summer. And, you can even do different kinds of tables. Like this was actually one that was for sale at Thanksgiving Farms that it took everything in my being to not buy. I didn't have room in my Prius for it, or it would have come home with me. Also you can do like wall decor. You can do wreaths and like letters for your last name, or numbers for your address. And the thing with these is about once a week you just take them down, and then again you put them in some sort of vessel that holds water so they'll absorb from underneath, and then once they're saturated you can hang them back up. I mean, raised bed planters for succulents are really logical, especially in areas that have like a higher water table. So, there's nothing wrong with just building a little planter and filling it with cool plants. At Flora Grub, again, if you have the chance to go out to San Francisco, this garden center is like a life-changing garden center. They sell these already made wall decorations, And here's the giant one. This is a permanent display there. That's like basically their selfie station. This is probably 30 by 30. It's absolutely enormous. I think window boxes are a really great way to grow succulents, especially this is my west facing kitchen window, and it's practically impossible to keep watered through the summer. And so I've always failed with growing kind of traditional window box plants, things like, coleus or petunias, things that need more water. And so I've just started using window boxes for succulents, and I don't have to be stressed out about keeping them watered. This is the planting I did last summer, and my cat loves to sit in it. I don't know what it is, but she just loves to like curl up with calanchoe. I've had this one window box planted for 6 years. I bring it in to my heated shed in the winter and then bring it out when we're frost free and hang it back up. And it looks great. This is actually outside of my bedroom window, which is east facing, and it still does really well with just morning sun. So again, these plants are really, really adaptable. You can do a mix of hardy and tender together. This is a really beautiful installation down in Athens, Georgia with Sedum ogon. And then the gray plant is Graptopetalum. And that textural combination is really dynamic. And actually in your area, the Graptopetalum would be totally hardy, so you wouldn't even have to worry. Now, hardy varieties can get planted in the ground and they'll be perennial and kind of live forever. And I love mixing succulents in with perennials, flowering perennials. They really do quite well. Some of my favorite hardy cultivars include the Sun Sparkler sedums. So these are a new variety that are really great because they bloom at different times throughout the summer. So Jade Tuffet is one that blooms in July. Dazzleberry is one that blooms more in September. Lime Twister is one that blooms like August into September. Firecracker is one that blooms like October into November. And Blue Elf is one that flowers at Thanksgiving. And because these are all like zone 4 hardy, these are zone 4 to zone 9. They're just really reliable perennial varieties that, again, are low maintenance, that offer seasonal beauty. Another favorite hardy variety is Sedum rupestri Angelina. And this is one that you've probably inevitably grown. Like you can literally just take a handful of it and like rip it out of a planting and move it somewhere else and it will root in. In the winter season, it gets this coppery color. And in the summer, it gets more of this bright chartreuse. It's just a really dynamic combo. And I grow it with dazzleberry. I like that purple and chartreuse together. A new variety, this actually won best new plant at Chelsea in 2020, or I'm sorry, in 2019. This is Sedum Atlantis, and I have it somewhere. I thought I had it on, I don't have it next to me, but it's a really beautiful, brilliantly variegated, hardy variety. And you can see here's Sedum Acre. This is just a really tiny little ground cover. And I actually grow that in combination with strawberries. And I just took that picture like yesterday. Sedum tectrinum is a hardy variety that does really well in sun, but also in full shade. Like you could grow this, under pine trees and it will just be a solid ground cover. This is usually blooming May, June, maybe a little bit into July. It has little yellow flowers. And again, just a really beautiful, easy, low maintenance perennial ground cover. It's actually fully evergreen. Now I talked about sempervivum and how I have had a lot of sempervivum die since I've lived in North Carolina. Sempervivum were like one of the first plants I ever grew as a kid. But I'm really happy. My friend Chris Hansen, who actually is the person who bred and introduced the Sun Sparkler sedums, has been focusing some time and energy on heat tolerant hens and chicks. And so he's created these chick charms, which you may have seen at garden centers lately. They're starting to really get widely distributed. There's actually 18 varieties. And I don't know why I say zones 3 through 6, because they're actually zones 3 through 9. That's a typo. But you can see all the different color texture combos that you can get with these. And there's a whole bunch of neat varieties. They all have cute names. And one of my favorites, I think, like the star of the show is Golden Nugget. And it really does. This is not a photoshopped picture. Here's Golden Nugget in my succulent table last winter. The thing with Sempervivum, when they bloom, they die. They will pup, and then you'll have to divide little pieces off. But in my case, my Golden Nugget flowered. So I didn't get to enjoy it for as long as I wanted to, but it was still really dynamic when I had it. Another hardy variety of succulent that I highly recommend are Orostachys. And here it is. This is a planting at Montrose, the estate garden that I worked at. And this is in an old sorghum boiling pot. And you can see this is what it looks like in the fall when it starts to flower. It's day length triggered and it's blooming. And some of the species I recommend, Orostachys iwarengi and Orostachys aggregatum. They will basically form a colony and they flower and then pup, and the overwintering structure is what that picture on the bottom right looks like. It almost looks like you could put your thumb down in the middle, and that's how you know that it will overwinter. And these are also fully evergreen, so they look good 12 months out of the year. My friend Chris Hansen was super interested in these, and now he's introduced gnome domes. So these are going to be different varieties of these hybrid species of Orostachys to give you lots of different colors. Now, some of my favorite tender succulents, and really I love tender succulents. Like, that is my passion in the succulent world. I just think that you can't beat tender succulents for the amount of interest that they offer. The fact that they aren't winter hardy, I don't think that should be a deterrent. Like I said, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I overwinter mine. But the fact that you go to the store and buy them once a year is also not like the worst allocation of your gardening budget. So some of my favorites include Aptenia cordifolia, and I happen to have that right next to me here. So this is actually a birch log planter that my mom gave me for my birthday this year from a garden center. And I planted it with different varieties of tender succulents, including Aptenia. And it's just beautiful. I have it here on my outdoor bar. It just kind of hangs over. Any variety of aloe, and I actually have some aloe that's about to bloom right here next to me. I've kind of never met an aloe I didn't like, so I didn't want to pigeonhole you into any one species. There's about 300 different species of aloe, so you'll really never get bored collecting them. Crassula, another really wonderful plant that kind of went out of style for a while, but it's coming back now. You know, this was really commonly grown as a house plant, especially in the 70s. And frequently this was included in, like instead of doing cut flowers for a funeral, you might send somebody, a mix of houseplants, and Crassula was usually part of that. They're really wonderful as outdoor specimens. Really, like, I would say April through November in this North Carolina climate. Echeveria, you can't go wrong with Echeveria. And there's 32 different species of Echeveria, and then like 100,000 different hybrids. So really the sky is the limit when it comes to collecting Echeveria. Some of my favorites include these like really ruffly varieties, Princess Lace. So you see it's like a seafoam green with these nice pink ruffled edges. I think Paul Bunyan's really funny. Like, I don't know that Paul Bunyan was warty, but now I think he is just because of this variety. Mademoiselle is one of the most elegant succulents that you'll ever find. It almost looks like a sea creature, but just an absolutely spectacular plant. The species Echeveria rosea is actually hardy in your area, so you could grow this in ground, or you could grow it in pots that you keep outside all winter long. And as is topsy-turvy, and this is the one that I was saying I used for my wedding, and this is actually even winter hardy here in zone 7. So it's one of the only echeverias that is reliably hardy into this climate. Now, Graptopetalum is another one of my favorites, and that's actually here and here. These are some different cultivars. And I've basically never met a Graptopetalum I didn't like. The funny thing is all of these different species or genera of succulents will hybridize with one another. So you can get Graptopetalum bisetum, you get Graptosetum, and you get these really interesting like colors in orange, or you can hybridize Graptovaria, or you can do Graptopetalum and Echeveria together, and you get these, more upright, very purplish tones. So again, like when you go to a nursery that specializes in succulents, you'll just be amazed at all of the different varieties that are available. One of my favorites is Huneria, and this is one oculata that has this giant, almost like starfish-like bloom that is here sitting. This is a picture of the table that I'm sitting at right now. These usually flower like the end of June and are actually pollinated by flies, so they don't smell great. I'll just give you that warning. But super beautiful, low maintenance, easy to grow, just kind of can't go wrong with it. Another really interesting Huneria is this one Zebrina. They often call this the lifesaver plant. And this will actually be covered in these starfish, lifesavers basically all summer long. So I often find this is a plant that like kids get really excited by. So, if you have kids in your life that you want to get interested in gardening, maybe buy them one of these. Kalanchoe, I think kalanchoes are a really important plant to grow. They're so low maintenance. They really take a lot of abuse. Sexangularis is one species that's quite nice. Thursifolia, that's again right here. They also call this the pancake plant. That is just a really, again, like a very dynamic, interesting, eye-catching variety. Kalanchoe tomentosa is one that actually has like gray fur all over the leaves. This one tends to not be as humid tolerant, so I actually kind of recommend growing this like under the cover of a front porch or an eave, just to help prevent it from getting like excessive moisture. Now, mangaves are the newest plant to hit the succulent world, and you know what? If you like the look of an agave, but you don't want to hurt yourself, mangaves are the plant to grow. This is an intergeneric hybrid of agave and manfreda. They're totally evergreen and hardy for you guys. They're kind of marginal for me, so I grow mine in containers and bring them in the winter season, but you would not have to do that. Some of the varieties, there's like 50 varieties now. Plant Delights has been integrated in the breeding process of this, so you can go to the Plant Delights website to see more. I love Spotty Dotty, Moonglow, Bad Hair Day, Pineapple Express. They all have really cool names. You can order these online from Mountain Crest Gardens, and they're very inexpensive. Or you can, again, order from Plant Delights, or you could visit Plant Delights. If you do that, I'm just a few miles away, so then you're sort of obligated to come visit my garden as well. They're just so incredible. So this is sort of my newest collection obsession. I think I have about 24 cultivars, and I keep finding more. I mean, kaleidoscope, this is one that actually offsets really regularly. So it's nice because every year from one plant, you might end up with 25 plants. So it's an easy plant to get to share with people. You know, the options of mangaves are basically never ending. Like they're every color, they're variegated, they're spotted, they have wavy foliage, they have upright foliage. It's just one of these things that it's such a game changer for the succulent world. Here's some of mine displayed at my fire pit, which we don't do fires in the summer, so I cover my fire pit with succulent planters. And Cubby, my cat, enjoys the scenery. Some sedums that aren't really hardy but are great to grow: sedum nussbaumerianum and pachyphytum. And these, you know, again, it's that color and texture combo that make them so interesting. Sedum rubrotinum. This is like the jelly bean plant. You'll often see this sold in hanging baskets, but it's very adaptable. Here it is planted with, you know, a type of Echeveria and Sedum japonica Tokyo Sun, just really looking awesome together. So, you know, how do I overwinter these succulents? So I have literally right behind me, this wall that's behind me is an attached shed, and we had a heat duct added to it. So in the summer, it is air conditioned. In the winter, it's heated to the normal room temperature. And I just add some grow lights to that room and put them on a timer. And I completely fill this room with my tender plants, especially tender succulents. So literally like on top of the refrigerator, and I have shelves up top. I just fill the whole space with my tender succulents, and I don't water them at all. I usually put everything in there around Thanksgiving, and I take them out when temperatures are consistently over freezing. So I brought them out this year, like the last week of March. And then I had to bring a bunch of succulents inside because we had frost in April. So, you know, there's never really like the perfect time, but generally the key here is keeping them well lit and not watering them at all. And the reason I stopped bringing them inside my house is because I couldn't control myself from watering them. And that was how I killed them. So in the winter, even with grow lights, it's not the normal light spectrum. They aren't actively growing, and they really cannot tolerate extra moisture. So the easiest way to overwinter your succulents is to put them in a place where you're not tempted to water them. And for me, it's this outdoor shed where I actually have to like climb on a ladder to be able to get to everything. When I use these pretty combos as winter houseplants, inevitably in January, I would say, oh, I'll just give it a little water. And within 2 weeks, the entire planter would die. So don't do that. If you want to overwinter them, just resist the urge. Do not water them. So really what I want to encourage you to do is just have fun and be creative. Really, the sky is the limit with succulents. Like, you're not going to fail. Like, even if you only grow them for one summer, you will have fun with it because they are just so cool. And they're so low maintenance and they're so pest free. So I thank you guys for joining me today. And I didn't go too over time, so that's always good. I hope you'll keep in touch. And of course, if you guys ever want to take a road trip, you know, come up and visit. You can tour the gardens here and visit Plant Delights and JC Ralston. And actually, we have a great garden center here that sells succulents called Big Bloomers. And I'm guaranteed that you'll fill your cars with plants. At least I do every time I go there. So there's a lot to do, and I'd love to have you visit. And I'd also love to come down. I'm fully vaccinated now. I'm ready to leave my house.
That's great, Brie. Do you have a few minutes to answer questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I will ask people who have questions if you want to unmute yourselves and ask any questions you have for Brie. take a while to get everybody unmuted.
Oh yeah, it's always a process.
I am.
I have to tell all of our wonderful people who have Instagram to follow Brie on Instagram. Her photos are unbelievable. They are the most cheerful, wonderful thing. They helped get me through the pandemic. I gotta tell you, her pictures are unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Oh, well, thank you.
Oh, but it's true. It's true. So definitely follow Brie on Instagram for sure.
Good old Instagram. It is a nice, it's so visual.
It is. It absolutely is.
I think Bree, you might want to consider writing that book.
It's funny. My first book offer was on succulents, and I don't know what happened, but somehow I know, my house flooded. I had a catastrophic house flood, and I got out of the contract because life was way too confusing and difficult. And now I'm like, oh, I probably should have written a book on succulents.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
I have a question for Sue about Brie. Some of the presentation, are you going to, like, I tried to take notes as quickly as I could, but that slideshow really had a lot of wonderful information. And I missed things I wanted. Like the nursery that's nearby, that's after Plant Delights and then on the way to you for some succulents. Those
Oh, totally. Yeah, I emailed Sue the PowerPoint. So if you want, you can send it, or you can email me and I can send it.
I'll send it out.
Yeah,
Susan always
it's,
said about
Jolene's garden is one of the houses that's going to be on tour. So I'm sure that some succulents are going to be added, Bree.
They already are, which I didn't, I never put the two and two together. One of my point of views in the garden is I really hate pine straw because I really hate snakes. And
yes.
pine straw here is a big deal. So we switched to mulch. My husband pretty much hates the mulch as much as I hate pine straw because it floats and it gets all over the grass and it's just a horrible. So we've done a lot of things. And one of my promises to him, and I've been working on it, is that at some point we will have no mulch because we will have complete ground cover. And I have golden stone hedge, sedum, a whole bunch of that. I also have several of the sedums you showed, creeping Jenny, which I think is in that family too. It's just kind of like a weed. It just goes.
It does its job. Yes.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It transplants itself. The wind blows it up. There's some more. So I have much more sedum than I thought after seeing your presentation, but mostly in regards to ground cover.
Yes.
But maybe I'll branch out.
Well, it's my mission to do the same. I don't want to have to mulch anymore, or I want to mulch like maybe just the edge to differentiate lawn from landscape. And my entire focus is ground plane coverage. And I actually just posted a video on sedum. Oh my God, I forgot to include it in here now that I'm saying that. Kamchaticum. And it's an absolutely fantastic ground cover, and it fills in all the gaps,
Oh yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. And it's evergreen, so it's not like it disappears for half the year. That's the thing with ground plane coverage, because you can do it with flowering perennials, but then they go dormant in the winter.
Spell that, Kamchaticum?
Kamchaticum, yeah, CamShaticum.
Wow.
If I would fail in a normal spelling bee, but if it was botanical Latin, I can spell it. It's like my second grade teacher would be like, "Oh, Brie."
Excellent. Ground cover.
Yeah, if you come to visit me, you'll inevitably go home with sedum kamchaticum.
Count on, we'll be there.
Just before the pandemic, Bree, we had a trip planned to your general area going to J.C. Ralston and Plantalites. Hopefully we'll be able to reinstitute that, and maybe we'll be able to come visit you too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're the place you want to like either start your day or end your day, because we serve mimosas and wine, and like you don't
Oh.
get that at those gardens.
Oh,
I think you just sold the trip.
Like you'll see we have wine bottle walls everywhere, because that's how I make my raised beds, is using wine bottles. And so we're like literally every garden tour that comes here contributes to the bottle wall.
Brie, what's the name of your place?
Well, so I live in Fuquay. So I'm just south of Raleigh by like 18 miles, and I'm only about 15 minutes from Plant Delights. In fact, I moved here because I was working at Plant Delights. So that was how because I was in Chapel Hill. And so that's how I landed on this side of Raleigh. So yeah, I mean, we just live in a suburban neighborhood, just having a very extensive garden. Which actually, I had to show you this view because it really looks like a kind of a fairyland right now. With all the, I don't know if you can see that, like all the bachelor buttons, and then like the poppies and larkspur that are all in bloom. It's really awesome. It's a really nice time of year, and I think my Wi-Fi will let me go here. If you can see all the different colors of poppies.
Yes, and they're on her Instagram too.
Yes, they are. It's like I call it mini Afghanistan, because these are all opium poppies. There's probably 10,000 open right now. It's crazy. But it's a pretty view, look out and see all this rainbow. It's a very May specific thing.
Do we have any other questions for Brie? Okay, I think you must have covered everything then, Brie.
Well, that's my goal, try to be thorough.
We're delighted to see you again, and hopefully we'll see you here in Brunswick Forest or at your house.
Yes, and both.
Or both, yes.
That works.
Thank you so much. And ladies, we'll have the information about the garden stroll out soon.
Well, you are welcome. Thank you guys for having me again. It's a treat.
Thank you.
It's a treat for us.
yes, it was. Thanks, Brie. Very nice.
you.
Thank you. Back
Well,
to the,
have
you.
a great rest of the day, everybody.
it's a good one. Back into the garden.
That's right.
Remote.
Very much. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.